So, Dzień dobry. Thank you for being here. I know it's the last conference of the week, but thank you very much. So, my name is Gabriel Desbiens. I'm from Montreal International, the Economic Development Agency. So, my job is to help foreign companies establish themselves in the greater Montreal region. And I'm with Hendrik and
Yeah, sure. Hi, Hendrik Taulin, not with the Embassy of Canada in Poland, but in Germany. However, I do cover the whole of Central and Eastern Europe. So basically what Gabriel's doing for Montreal, I'm doing for the whole of Canada on a federal level. And yeah, we want to take the opportunity in the next like 35, 40 minutes to talk a bit about Canada, and then hopefully there will be Q&As. I guess it's fair to put the country which is the furthest away at the last spot of the conference, so we had time to come here and adjust to the jet lag. So we're doing good. Let's start. So I'm not sure whether you know that Canada is actually one of the top 10 games market worldwide, and with the third largest video game developing nation in the world after the United States and Japan. And figuring that when we go international and speak to companies, not everybody might have had an exposure to Canada yet. So maybe let's set the scene a bit and start with, click here. Start a bit with Canada's economy, because when we talk to people, what do you know about Canada if you haven't any business there? It's that they say, oh, isn't there a nice landscape? Yes, it is. Holidays for skiing, fishing, anything. Yes, that's all true. Can we play hockey? Yes, we can. However, we can also do business. So Canada is a G7 country, which means it's one of the seven leading industrial nations in the world, which means by definition, we have to have everything in all sectors of the economy. So primary, think about any metals, minerals, commodities, oil, gas, potash, uranium, gold, copper, you name it. That's all to be found in Canada, as much as we do have manufacturing in a classical sense. So one thing I'd always like to tell is that a lot of people don't know there's more cars being produced in that little part of Canada here than on the other side in Detroit, where apparently GM, Chrysler and Ford are sitting. Why do people don't know that? Because we don't have a Canadian brand. It's international investors who are coming to Canada, Toyota, Ford and all the others producing the cars there. But apparently we also have the service sector, which the ICT and gaming is part of, and we come to that in a second. So a bit of, in order to put you in perspective, Canada's economy is highly decentralized. Yes, we do have a capital, which is not even named here. It's called Ottawa. It's somewhere here, halfway between Toronto and Montreal. However, let's say the largest industrial and also ICT and gaming centers, hubs, are somewhere else. I just named a few industries, and you already see by the distribution of the economic centers that most of the economic power in Canada is actually within 100 miles to the United States border. So the rest up there, going up to the Arctic Sea, it's, as the Americans would say, at the Great White North. So there's not much to be found there except for those mining commodities which I just named. Talking a bit more about the tech sector, you will see that I named a few hubs there: Vancouver, Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal. And actually in those cities, I just said Vancouver, Edmonton, Montreal, Ottawa, you find about 80% of the Canadian ICT sector. Actually, yeah, Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto are the major hubs. For example, take Toronto, it's about 65,000 people in those so-called STEM subjects, and most of the institutions there, colleges, universities, would have programs specifically for computer engineering, game designing, digital media, etc. I'm not going to go too much into Montreal because Gabriel is going to do that, the esteemed colleague from the region, just dropping a few figures. It's close to 19,000 people working in gaming alone in Montreal, with about 220 plus studios being there active. And on the far west coast, Vancouver enjoys the vicinity of the United States. So think about any Hollywood movie, and the probability is very high that this movie has been shot in Western Canada or downtown Montreal or Toronto. Why? Because we have very generous tax credits, and I guess I named that a beautiful landscape as well to do so. There are, on the tax side per general, for example, also a few other things Canada is excellent in, for example, artificial intelligence. This is one of the areas where I would think that Canada really is leading the world. We have 3 world-class institutes in Montreal, in Toronto, and Vancouver that are really driving forward those AI processes. So it's fair to say that those cities I just named are among the top markets for tech in the whole of North America. So also comparing with New York, San Francisco, Chicago, LA. It's a sector where we have about 2.8 million people coming in those university degrees which are very relevant to the sector. However, economic growth in Canada always is based on demographic growth. Right now we have about 38 plus million people living, and if you go back only 40 years, it used to be 20, 90, 80. So doubling the population in 40 years, which means we have to rely on qualified immigration in order to sustain the Canadian economic growth. That's why we as the federal government thought it might be nice to install a few programs. One is named there, the Global Skills Strategy. So if you have were to found a subsidiary in Canada of your studio and you want to bring in workers and they check a few boxes, then we can get them into the country in 2 weeks' time only instead of a couple of weeks or months for getting the necessary work permit. Bit more focusing on the game side. So Canada really is placed amongst the world leaders in game development, animation, visual effects. The sector is expanding and increasing. So we're talking about 3.6 million US dollars, $1 billion US dollars as the revenue of the sector. And actually we expect it to grow even further to 5.3, 5.5 this year. And basically all the sub-segments of the sector, of the industry are to be found in Canada. So middleware and services, virtual reality, augmented reality, mobile game, social game development, etc. So it's sector really on the growth side. And why are people coming to Canada and companies? Because others are saying about us, it's actually one of the best countries to do business, because it's quite easy to found a subsidiary in Canada. We could all go online right now, register, pay about, for those two-step process, about 300, 350 Canadian dollars, and then you would have your company maybe by tomorrow afternoon or on Friday morning, we would be registered for the company. And the minimum capital requirement is €0 or euro, so it doesn't cost a lot of capex in order to found a subsidiary in Canada. The impact of the industry is actually even a bit further. So we're talking, the spillover effects into other industries. It's close to 5.5 billion. In total numbers, around 33,000 people, full-time employees, and add another 25, so 55, 60,000 people, somewhat related to developing games in any kind in Canada. It's around, by now, 1,000 studios we have across the nation, and it's a well-paid industry. So you see 78,000 is the average full-time salary, which is about 240,000 Polish zloty. It's a good salary, and that would qualify to bring in the people within 2 weeks' time into the country. In terms of subsectors, I guess it's the same as everywhere. So mobile games have been pretty much on the rise in the last year. Esports, as much as AR and VR, and also social games were responsible for about 50% of the growth of the last years. Again, this decentralized economy, which I mentioned before. Main gaming centers being in the province of Quebec, Montreal, we're going to hear about in a second, Toronto and Vancouver. In the wider Belle Province, as we call Quebec, it's about 300 plus studios we're having. Vancouver on the west coast, it's one of the oldest gaming industry centers of Canada, or actually North America, since the 1980s. It's the only location where you find actually a dedicated esports arena in Canada of large size, because Vancouver is also pretty much tied, for example, to Microsoft and in the United States Northwest for visual reality and augmented reality. Why do companies come to Canada, not the United States? People think that, and that's what clients are saying, European investors, the Canadian mentality, it's more European, right? There's more ties, not only in Quebec, where there's a strong French element, which we're going to hear about, but also the rest of Canada. As I said, a lot of immigrants, which automatically brings a lot of European perspective into the nation and is maintaining the ties to European mainland nations. But also it can be cheaper. So if you compare, for example, locations such as Montreal and Toronto, it's about 25, 28% of a cost advantage of business costs across salaries, property costs, etc., capex in general, compared to some of the major hubs in the United States, such as California. We listed a few of the recent Polish examples of investments in Canada. So CD Projekt recently invested, and also People Can Fly, respectively in studios in Montreal and Vancouver. If you have more questions on that, I have my colleague from the embassy here in Poland, Katarzyna is here, so please reach out to her. And those companies, as much as the other nations, such as from France or Sweden or Japan, they're all banking on us, federal, provincial, municipal governments, supporting them with incentives of various kinds. Because this industry is not only driving innovation in the industry per se, but also in adjacent things. We think it's very innovative, and that's why we bank our buck, our Canadian dollar on that in various aspects, either direct grants and funding on federal or provincial level. So for example, in Ontario, where Toronto is located, you would get about 40% of applicable salaries or some marketing costs in a digital media tax credit. That's the second column. Quebec has similar programs we're going to hear about, but also foster the immigration of talent within shorter time and less red tape to be installed. One precondition really is you have to be a Canadian company, so found a subsidiary, which doesn't mean you can't do part of the development here in Poland or in your home nation, but work with a Canadian subsidiary or Canadian company in order to get access to some of those tax credits or direct grants, such as the Canada Media Fund. Or we have very generous, on a global level, compared tax credits. So any development being done, anything innovative, technology, processes, either done in Canada or in cooperation with a Canadian company, you get automatically 15% tax credits federally, plus match it with the provincial ones. And if you have a good accountant, that could save you up to 50 cents on each dollar being spent on innovative measures in Canada. Of course, tax credits getting back at the year's end. If you plan something larger, like 10 million, for example, investment. We have big initiatives on the Strategic Innovation Fund, which can give you up to 50% of the project cost, the CapEx being cushioned by us, the federal government. And already mentioned fast immigration tracks, such as the Global Skills Strategy. However, for any business case, the incentives, the support of government should only be the icing on the cake. So basically the homework, the business case has to make sense before. That's why, because we have a very prudent approach at the Canadian government level to managing our household, we always have some money to spend because the net debts of Canada are pretty low compared to European measures, which means we can work, for example, on tax rates. Canada, federal country, which means each province has a lot of power when it comes to education, or there's a different energy mix in each province. Some provinces are banking on nuclear, others like Quebec, they have 90% hydro energy, so very cheap as well. And the same applies for corporate income taxes. So it's always 15% on a federal level being matched by a provincial part, which on average then equals out to 26% of corporate income tax your subsidiary would have to pay taxation in Canada. So if we take this together, I think Canada, as for many reasons, is a springboard for the whole US-American market. So the Canadian market, although we just touched briefly, and I'd rather want to leave some time for individual questions, we touched briefly that there is a significant market in Canada with 1,000 studios, etc. We, or European clients, always use Canada also supplying to the 250 million people in the United States and partly Mexico, because we have a free trade agreement between those three countries. Used to be called NAFTA. Now with President Trump, they changed the name a bit, but it's pretty much the same. So services can go freely to the United States. The border is very transparent. Each minute it's about $2.5 million of goods and services going back and forth between Canada and the United States. But also Canada is the nation which has the most free trade agreements with any other country in the world. In Europe, it's a so-called CETA agreement, which not only means it's custom-free for most of the products, but more importantly, it provides for the recognition of qualification. So if you are an independent consultant, tax lawyer, or engineer, your qualification under this free trade agreement will automatically be recognized in Canada. We're still working out the exact procedures, but it will be, which means you're good to go. Otherwise, you would have to do a re-sitting exam like the United States. So that's what CETA is providing for, as much certification, standards. North America, different standards than Europe. So if there's anything, CETA will provide for that, but also Canada, because of the geographic location, reaching out to Asian markets via free trade agreements. So We have some room to maneuver, as I said, with favorable taxation rates. It's a very competitive business environment, not only in Canada, but spanning over to the United States as well. We have the workforce, because getting talent, you cannot always bring your people from Europe or from Asia. You will find those people in Canada, in Ontario, in Quebec, in British Columbia, etc., to work with you. Innovation being one of the major focus of the Canadian industry in many sectors. So institutions are working, bringing out this talent. You can cooperate with academic institutions and even get government funding for that. Get the easy access to the market, and in the end, we all believe that Canada is also a nice place to live in, as I said in the beginning, and by that, I'll conclude my little elevator pitch and hand over to one of the nicest places of living, which is called Montreal. So Gabriel will take it from there, and then afterwards, we'll jointly take questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Hendrik. So I'm going to start maybe with just a quick video to showcase a bit what we have in Montreal and give you the opportunity to see what we are proud of. So let's start this.
In Montreal, we live and breathe creativity. This is where big players and small studios craft their greatest success stories and come to harness our superpowers, our top talent, our innovative ideas, and our appetite for adventure. We're building a multiplayer ecosystem for the bold and the brave, here to propel projects to new heights and push the entire creative industry forward by giant steps. We're designing an open and inspiring world known for its diversity and joie de vivre. We're behind thousands of celebrated works from all four corners of the galaxy. We are Montreal. Get in the game.
So you saw a bit a showcase of some studios are there, but Montreal is not just about gaming industry, but it's all about the creative industry that we have. So we have a bit of a showcase now, yes, so we did that. I would like to start maybe with the top reason for you to consider Canada and Montreal as a way to invest if your company wanted to go international. So when it comes to Montreal, we have really a leading edge ecosystem in the gaming industry. We have 300 plus studios now in Montreal. It started really small back then, but I'm going to get back to that. So we have a lot of studios and a lot of workers in the industry. So 19,000 plus workers in the industry of the gaming sector. So it's really massive. And I'm going to get back later on to the incentives that we have that are really attractive for foreign companies that want to come to Canada, and also talk about the quality of life that we have. I think it depends on the region you are, but yes, we have winter, but it's still manageable to deal with that. So maybe a bit about the history of the ecosystem. So it didn't start from, it started a bit from scratch almost 25 years ago, and now Montreal is really the hub in Canada in terms of gaming studios that we have, and it's in part of the top 5 in the world. So really Montreal is at the forefront of the industry. It started about 25 years ago. We used to have studios like Behavior that you might know, but also Soft Image that was acquired by Autodesk. So, we had that ecosystem of creativity that was there, but no major player was in town. So 25 years ago, the Quebec government decided to try to attract and seduce big players, and that big player was Ubisoft, and there was maybe that connection with the French language, yes, but the Quebec government decided to give great incentives to attract them. I'm going to get into the details, but that was the first step of having a major studio in Montreal, and it just opened the opportunities for the rest of the ecosystem. So you see some names here. You have the tax credit. But now, in the early 2000s, the industry changed a bit in Montreal, so to give more space to indie studio, to make sure that they have the opportunity to collaborate. So it's not just about big studios that we want to attract, but it's also smaller players to make sure that we can collaborate. And that's, I think, what's really distinctive about Montreal ecosystem is the collaboration that you have between major studios and smaller studios. And you see a bit what you want, and to use also opportunity to, have the power and one voice with the government to make sure that they get here. And now the future is all about, Hendrik was talking about AI. Montreal is at the forefront of AI. We are really pushing it for also ethical AI. You have GDPR here, but we have also a strict kind of rules set in Quebec and in Canada. So it's interesting to explore the opportunities also when it comes to gamification and whatnot. So VR, AR is getting there stronger and stronger. And that's the future now of the gaming that we see in Montreal, the change that we have. So it's not just about the gaming industry, but it's all the sectors are collaborating together, and it's easy to get in touch with people. So you see here an overview of major games that you maybe know. Assassin's Creed, you've seen the character and the video. You know, it's the famous one, but you have Batman and others. So it's a lot of products are made in Montreal or in collaboration with other studios, but that comes for game development, but also for VFX and creative industry. I was talking about the ecosystem, so it's a large ecosystem with different sectors, so about the technologies, about services and developers. So it's all about, having a full ecosystem that can sustain the evolution of the companies. And I was talking about Autodesk, but it used to be Softimage, as I mentioned. So they have all the technologies they brought there, and it's really moving forward. So that's how we see the ecosystem here. A timeline about some studios that came to Montreal in the recent years. So there's a lot of players, but you see People Can Fly, we mentioned before in 2021. But you have other studios from the region, Amber Studio, Rainbow, Room 8. So there's a lot of studios coming and considering Montreal as a first destination to open a shop abroad. So it's still coming. We're going to have a new slide eventually for 2022, but that's coming soon. Talking about the ecosystem, we have a big association. It's called La Guilde du Jeu Vidéo. Yes, it's in French, so we speak French in Montreal. It's a major association for smaller and bigger studios. It's one voice I was mentioning, and they also have support for smaller studios. So if you need to negotiate for your insurances and whatnot, or give workshops, they have all the power for that. So it's really interesting for you if you want to better understand the ecosystem, to be in touch with them. They're also in charge of one of the major events that we have in Montreal. There's also Zillium. It's a place for studios if they want to, for example, collaborate and have one roof and chit-chat with others, so that's a way to do it. Talking about maybe more about the talent now. So Montreal is really Canada's university in terms of number of universities we have. We have 15, so there's a lot. Some are in French, some in English, some bilingual, so you have the opportunity to see. Over half the population of Quebec is located in Greater Montreal, and Montreal is really pushing, and Quebec is really pushing when it comes to research and development. We mentioned it about, but you can get the 15% from the federal level, but you can get a 14% refundable tax credit, so it's a cashback if you do research and development in Montreal. And we also voted best student city in the world in 2023, so we get those awards over and over. And there's a lot of foreign students coming to Montreal. And the great opportunity also, if you're still a student or you want to go back to school, it's the possibility to stay in Canada after that. So if you go and study a bachelor or a master or a PhD, you can stay the same number of years that you've been there studying. You can stay and be there with an open work permit. So that's pretty a good occasion for you to explore. I was talking about also the ecosystem. So we built also the ecosystem. We have 75 programs related to the video game industry. That means we have now yearly 45,000 students enrolled in those kind of programs in universities, 7,500 in colleges. So it's massive. So each year we have new talent that is injected in the ecosystem. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of the ecosystem, to build that also school system, educational system, not just for beginners, but also if you want to better your skills with that. So we can really explore and be part of the ecosystem. And now we're going to get to the place that maybe some people are really looking for, the incentives, why Montreal, and I'm going to talk about it. It's the multimedia tax credit. So literally, it's 37.5% cashback on the salary of game developers. There's some rules around it. So if you have a French version, you can go to that number. If you don't, it's 30%. But nowadays, most game studios, they develop the game in different languages to make sure that they target in all the market. So that's really interesting for you. You have different combinations if you're a subcontractor or not, but it's really an opportunity for you to have access to it. And I'm going to show you the next slide. It's just a comparison of the salaries. So you see the salaries, that they have, but the cashback goes to the employer. So the rules for that is to make sure that you have fiscal residence in the province of Quebec. So if you open the subsidiary there in Montreal, you have employees. All the employees are game developers or project managers. They can get access to that 37.5% cashback. Example, it's capped at 100,000 Canadian dollars. So, if your salary is 100,000 Canadian dollars, you're going to get 37.5 thousand cashback on the salary. But there's an exception for 20% of your staff. So if your staff is making more than 100,000 Canadian dollar, you can still have that percentage of tax credit. So it's math. You can find a lot of information online. I can send you the presentation if you're interested. But that's really a way to optimize the incentives that we have that's really attractive for companies that are looking for it. And from the industry here, salaries, wages went up in Poland. So if you compare salaries, sometimes it can't get to break even at the same time. And there's no limit to that tax credit, right? It's for now, it's forever, and it's good. And that's how the Quebec government realized that it was good for the economy to bring that, because they get the money back somehow by the job creation. So everyone that's working there, they're going to pay taxes in Quebec, and they're going to get a part of the money back. But that's really what is impressive and attractive in that sense. I was talking about some events. I think the major event that you should attend if you want to explore the Canadian market and learn more about Quebec and Montreal is the Megamigs. It's in the fall. The dates are not out yet, but last year it was end of October. It should be there soon. So if you come, just find me on LinkedIn, write to me. We're there. We can help you connect, network. That's our mandate, but it's really the occasion for you to go, and it's really more a human scale event. Maybe you've been to other events in Germany or GDC. It's sometimes hard to connect. That's why I like here, for example, a Digital Dragon to be able to connect with people, and it's easy. It's the same in Montreal, so it's a great occasion for you to attend. And maybe just some quotes of some studios that we have in Montreal, but I would maybe take some time to talk about the quality of life that we have in Montreal. Hendrik mentioned it. It's a mixed culture between Europe and America. The way of doing business is really American. You have 2 weeks. If you want to fire someone, it's 2 weeks. But you can also get a job pretty easily. And it's all about experiences. So it's not about your diplomas. It's all about the experience that you have to come. Cost of living in Montreal is really low compared to other major North American cities. It's half the price most of the time from Toronto or Vancouver. The rent are really cheap. It's getting more expensive nowadays, but it's still possible to afford housing, to buy a house, to send your public health is there. There's a public health system to make sure that it's free. You can send your children for $7 per day at the kindergarten. So it's all, an impact that we have that if you want to move, you consider that maybe for your family, it's a way to expand. It's really a safe city. I think you just have to adapt. We have 4 seasons in Poland. I think you used to have 4 seasons, but other than the snow, it's pretty easy. And same for companies. So for office spaces, it's pretty affordable. It's a great opportunity. So for me, really, it's there's 4 aspects for that. Is the collaborative ecosystem that we have in Montreal, that it's really strong. The different incentives that are available for companies, but also the talent pool that we have. That's really, they have a lot of know-how, but we need more. We need more ideas, we need more collaboration, and that's why I'm here also to open that discussion with companies from Poland, from other regions, Central Europe or Eastern Europe, to have that discussion to make sure that we can build those bridges and collaborate. So I'm open, we're open for questions now, if you have some. And thank you for being here. I know it's late in the event. I'm sure the beer is going to be good after. So, yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm working with Japanese gaming industry, and I'm actually also lobbying to Japanese governments to create more public funding, since there's currently none. And that leads me to one of the questions. What happened 25 years ago that the government decided to create all those incentives and build up the industry?
Yeah, I think Quebec had to renew itself back then. That was a time that Quebec, I don't know, maybe you've heard about it, but there were 2 referendums in Quebec to try to be independent from the rest of the country. It was a big decision, and a lot of companies went to other provinces because they got a bit scared of the situation. It didn't happen, and I think Quebec government said, okay, we need to be more proactive, we need to reinvent ourselves, and that was one part of the plans, but also to make sure that we attract major studios. So Montreal always been really creative. When you look at movies that we show around, there's a lot of Quebec movies that make it to Europe. The creativity is there when it comes to dance, circus, you have Cirque du Soleil. So you have the ecosystem, but it was missing a bit big players and foreign players. So that's why they say, okay, we want to get Ubisoft to come to Montreal. So they were looking for spaces. They found a great space in a neighborhood that was still a bit more developing. But the deal was, we're going to offer you that incentive, but you need to give back to the society, to the community. So, Ubisoft is installed there, but they have to give back. They do workshops, they give to different charities in the neighborhood. So it's part of the deal also. It's not just giving money for free. It's all about the commitment of companies that are coming to the region. So I think that's a deal that they have to do, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the Quebec answer. So the whole Canadian answer is, it's similar because I guess I mentioned it briefly. Canada is a G7 country, which means commodities, manufacturing, and also services. However, the blessing, but also a bit of the curse is, since we have so much of any commodities in the world, means also our currency, the Canadian dollar, will always be somewhat dependent on what's happening on the world market prices. So if the oil prices are high, Canadian dollar is high. If it's low, then it's low. Right? So Canada really needs to do some structural change. And 25 years ago, 30 years ago, for example, that was also when the NAFTA agreement was concluded between Canada and the United States. Until then, Canada was a bit in many manufacturing industries like an outsourcing nation, also for the United States and as potential sales market. But then we realized in Canada that the volatility of the international commodity markets is not enough for us. So we needed to do a change. For example, if you look at classical manufacturing, where the industry chains in Germany, in Japan, in Sweden took place in the 1980s, that only happened in Canada from the 90s onwards. So we really need to refocus away a bit from the dependency of world market prices for commodities to manufacturing, innovative manufacturing, and out of that, like everywhere in the world, the ICT industry emerged and with the subsector of the gaming industry. And in order to attract that, and I mentioned it also briefly, to sustain the economic growth by demographic growth, we needed to invent something how to attract people and / companies to the market. So really a structural change happening a bit later than in some other nations globally.
So trying to understand a bit the kitchen behind the policymakers, like was there a common, let's say, understanding and shared goals from the beginning, like yes, the digital economy is the way to go? Like no. How did it look like, from the back end, so to speak?
We mentioned it, since Canada being a federal country, there's...
Sorry, one more thing. Because what you said, like there's been a lot of like external factors that led to this big strategic decision, no? I was wondering if there was also some internal activities or like lobbying or activists that were pushing for, hey guys, the government needs to do something about the creative economy in that sense? Like, I was wondering, like, what was the gravity and dynamics of the situation back then?
Both. The external one, so seeing Canada's position on the world market and remaining a G7 nation, but also internal one. And what I was just going to say is that being a federal nation, of course, there's big disputes between East and West. So similar to other nations, for example, Great Britain, Scotland versus England, Germany, Bavaria against the rest. In Canada, I wouldn't say only point out Quebec, but Eastern Canada towards Western Canada. And again, it depended a bit on the commodity prices. If they're high, Western Canada is rowing. So for example, when the oil sands in Alberta were high in the 2000s, every citizen of Alberta got for Christmas a $400 check, just for nothing. The next day you could go to travel agencies and there were all these offers for $399, go do a shopping trip to the United States in order to reimburse the economy. And that's when Western Canada is kind of migrating the money to Eastern Canada, and then when the prices are down for commodities and more the classical manufacturing industries were up, then Eastern Canada was cushioning out and helping Western Canada. So we decided, okay, we cannot outscore the United States. I mean, yes, we can in some pockets, but we need to really focus on the tertiary sector, the service sector. That's why a focus coming from the insights, and after all the premiers of the 10 Canadian provinces and 3 territories sit down and said, okay, we need to find a way. And that was one of the directions, going into the service sector and creating industry which is global with some local hubs, like Montreal, like Vancouver, like Edmonton. But really, this is where we can outscore also the world, for example, in the AI or also in the gaming sector. So both external factors, which you cannot change because it's a curse and it's also a blessing if a lot of commodities you are dependent, but also internal factors to remain a highly industrialized and leading economic nation in the world.
So you did have actually like activists or lobbying from the creative industry to do more?
Yes, and I think it's also a difference in Canada and Quebec. I think the governments are really keen to support industries, and it's non-stop. I say the tax credit is forever, and it's going to stay there. Everyone who tries to approach it and maybe change it, they back off. So even though there is a change of power and change in the power or direction, they keep those incentives because they know it's paying off. Because for us, at least when I track a foreign company, when they create one job in the Canadian economy, it's going to create 600 jobs in the ecosystem. So we see the value of foreign direct investment. We keep them, so it was a bit to attract the big players from abroad, but then it's paying off also for the local industry. Same in the AI. Canada always supported the AI industry, never stopped to fund it in the 80s and 90s, and that's why maybe we're now at the forefront. A lot of people stop because it's just a funny thing to explore AI in the 80s, but now we see where it goes.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay.
Hi, I'm Darko from the UN World Food Program. My question is more in the direction of social stuff. I experience Canada as, a very nice place from the media. Who wouldn't, right? And so my question is about, well, maybe more specific, about the industry of social gaming or games for change, serious games. Given Canada's reputation and involvement in humanitarian issues and humanitarian grounds and all that stuff, is this something that is also a meaningful sector or subsector within the gaming industry in Canada? Is this something that reflects also Canadian policy? Is this in development as well?
I guess I mentioned it briefly that if you look at the industry in general over the last 5 years, 50% of the industry growth came from social games, actually. So you're absolutely right that it's kind of reflecting a bit Canada's values, which we're trying to convey into the world, how we behave in international conflicts, how we try to foster a greener economy, etc. So diversity, it's a big issue. It's a very much difference. Like in my former life, I used to work in Bulgaria and Hungary, and now working with Canada, it's totally different, these kind of things. And you see it depicted by pure numbers also in social gaming. But maybe you have some more insights on the ground.
I wouldn't be able to answer your question properly, but so I don't want to give you a wrong answer. But I think the awareness, I was talking maybe more about the AI, the ethical AI. Everything that we want to build has to be sustainable is a buzzword, but it's still in the mind of the people that are creating games, that are creating that ecosystem to make sure that we respect rules and sustainability.
Okay, so thank you very much, guys. It was very nice to get.
Dziękuję.